I died with my eyes wide open on my birthday. It was a rainy day when I was buried. A familiar voice seemed to pierce through the soil. I remember she left quite a lot of inheritance, didn't she? The man was silent for a moment, and then he and the woman burst into wild laughter. It was a noisy quarrel that woke me up. When I woke up, there was no one around me. Am I back? Going downstairs, I saw Scarlett with her hands on her hips, directing the movers. The woman's voice was quite coquettish. Be careful, don't break it. I picked these out carefully. Damien was wearing a black casual suit, looking travel-worn. It seemed that these pieces of furniture had just been bought back by her from outside. The man solicitously poured a glass of water for her and familiarly helped her sit down. They looked exactly like a newlywed couple. But I was the wife, and now I felt like an outsider. When Damien looked up and saw me coming down, he moved aside stiffly and then got up in a hurry. Elaine, you're awake. His expression was calm, but a hint of discomfort flashed in his eyes. I nodded and my eyes fell on Scarlett's face. In my past life, it was this innocent-looking face of hers that completely deceived me. She still smiled gracefully. Sister Elaine, look at the things I picked for you too. Do you like them? Following her finger, I looked around. The originally cold and lifeless atmosphere became more lively because of the furniture. The dark blue sofa, the dark blue carpet. All were in her favorite colors. This woman was so impatient to move in. This wasn't about sending furniture for me. It was secretly creating a love nest for her and Damien. I slightly curved my lips and calmly put Damien's arm around myself. Suppressing the nausea in my heart, I gently leaned my head on his shoulder. Thanks, Scarlett. Your brother and I are really grateful to you. The smile on the girl's face froze instantly, but her eyes were fixed on Damien. I felt so blind. They had so many obvious flirtations in the past, but I didn't notice any of them. I exclaimed that I had forgotten something and hurried upstairs and then came down again. I handed a delicate gift box to Scarlett. The woman's face already looked quite ugly. This is specially prepared by your brother and me for you. There were our wedding photos of Damien and me inside, along with some wedding gifts. Damien looked solemn and didn't dare to say a word. He was probably afraid that I would discover their dirty deeds. Damien and I didn't sleep well last night. I need to sleep a bit more. After saying that, I yawned and went upstairs on my own. Before I could close the door, I heard a bang. It should be Scarlett smashing the gift box. Only from a distance could I hear Damien's voice, lowered. Just bear with it a little longer. Our good days are coming soon. Strangely, after coming back, my hearing seemed to have become more sensitive. In the past, Damien had deafened one of my ears. All for Scarlett, his so-called sister. Scarlett and Damien had no blood relationship at all. After all, it was I who created the opportunity for them to meet. Scarlett was a child sponsored by my parents, who had the opportunity to come to the big city to study and work. And then she met Damien. And Damien could become the live-in son-in-law of the Elaine family only because of my love for him. Perhaps because they had seen the prosperous outside world. Two people from not-so-well-off families comforted each other, and their inner desires were infinitely magnified. That's why in my past life, they colluded with each other. I remember that it was a heavy rainy day. I was on my knees, grabbing Damien's trouser leg. My voice was hoarse. Please let my parents go. The smell of the leather soaked by the rain pierced into my nostrils. Those were the shoes I had chosen for him. Damien got involved in the expansion project of the Alexander family in the North City to the south. My father trusted him so much that he handed it over to him completely. But in the end, Damien framed my father with the crime of stealing commercial secrets. He was old, and he was killed in prison by that man, and my mother followed him. Overnight, I lost everything. Damien didn't even bother to look down at me. He kicked me on the head. There was a roaring in my ears, and even the sound of the rain became dull. But then he held my face pitifully. Elaine, it's all your fault. It's you who brought me into the Elaine family. The rain with the smell of soil hit me, making my heart ice cold. A pair of high heels slowly appeared in my blurred vision. Brother Damien, it's so cold. Let's go back. The girl was on her tiptoes, afraid that her shoes would get a bit of dirt on them. She walked towards me, her eyes bright, filled with excitement and impatience. She lifted her foot and wiped the upper of her shoe on me. It was a pair of shoes of the same brand as Damien's. The couple series that I used to love the most. The two of them walked away side by side. Remembering everything from the past, I felt a stabbing pain in my heart. I don't know when the rain stopped. I was still lying numbly on the muddy ground. There was no angry cursing, no revenge. The sun came out, and the clouds were washed clean. Damien, you really climbed up the ladder. Half a month after the Elaine family changed hands, the news of Elaine's suicide spread throughout the whole circle. Everyone was lamenting the unpredictability of life, but they all stayed away from it. When I woke up from the dream, a large part of the pillow was already wet. My father called me, Elaine, remember to come home for dinner with Damien. The voice on the phone was deep and resonant. I hadn't heard it for a long time. My nose tingled, and I actually forgot to answer. Elaine? I quickly snapped back to reality and replied with a crying smile. Before going out, I handed Damien a pair of shoes. I think these shoes suit you very well. Wear them today. The man seemed a bit flustered as he carefully opened the box. It was the pair of shoes that had once stepped on my face. He put on a very surprised look and smiled obsequiously. Thank you, wife. I gave a knowing smile, watching him put them on, with coldness in my eyes. Starting from today, I'll use these shoes to send you on your way. At the dinner table, everyone was in high spirits and it was quite lively. Dad brought up that project. The Alexander family in the North City is looking for partners in the southern market. This is an opportunity for the Elaine family. Hearing this, my fingertips turned white from clenching. Just thinking about it. So I suppressed the hatred in my heart and volunteered, Dad, let me be in charge of this time. If this project were to fall on me, Damien would be the first to object. Then I could just go with the flow and let him take the responsibility willingly. It would be best to completely absolve myself and my parents. Sure enough, he quickly chimed in, the project is no small matter. Besides, you're not in good health. Why don't you let me follow Dad and you take a good rest? I hesitantly looked at Dad. His always gentle eyes seemed to be asking for my opinion at this moment. Despite the lump in my throat, I forced myself to nod with difficulty. Damien was in a great mood and soon finalized the date to meet with the Alexander family. The heir of the Alexander family who had been in charge for many years, Alexander. I had met him before. He was decisive in his work and showed no mercy. I wasn't even sure if he had a hand in the affairs of the Elaine family. For this unknown acquaintance, it would be better for me to meet him in person. It was a long time later when we met with the Alexander family. I followed behind Damien. The man was sitting lazily in the boss chair. He was wearing a bespoke suit, and the tie at the messy collar was nowhere to be seen. It seemed that he had worked late last night and was in a bad mood. Alexander was stunned for a moment when he saw me, and then got straight to the point. Your father has already talked to me about the project. He stared straight at me, and there was actually a hint of pity in his eyes. Damien bowed and eagerly chimed in, yes, the Elaine family also attaches great importance to this project. I think. The man sitting clearly had lost his patience and interrupted him. Damien's back stiffened, and his face looked quite ugly. I pulled his elbow, and only then did Alexander's gaze fall on Damien. I'll talk to him. Damien's smile froze on his lips. He walked away quickly, not forgetting to remind me kindly, call me immediately if anything happens. I'll be right outside. Alexander just stared at me. His eyes were as dark as the night, making it impossible for me to guess what he was thinking. Just as I was thinking about what to say to deal with him, the man spoke first. The Elaine family isn't my first choice. I was speechless. Then why did he agree to meet with us? But if he didn't cooperate with the Elaine family, my plan wouldn't even have a chance to start. The Elaine family needs this cooperation. He had an arrogant tone, but I don't. I remained patient. Then what are your conditions, General Manager Alexander? Alexander pointed at me with his finger. I want you to be the person in charge of this project. What did he mean by that? Although there was nothing wrong with it. If I were in charge, it would make Damien more eager for success. The sooner he couldn't hold back, the sooner he would show his weaknesses. But I wasn't sure which side Alexander would ultimately stand on. I shook my head. No. The man raised an eyebrow, seemingly a bit surprised. Reason? I'm pregnant. Alexander's gaze froze. The pen he had been playing with in his hand just now dropped, making a rather loud noise. The man frowned slightly, but there was an ambiguous smile on the corner of his mouth. He didn't say anything more, and the air froze for a moment. Damien barged in and grabbed my hand. General Manager Alexander. I lowered my eyes, looking at the hands that might have held Scarlett's countless times. I just felt disgusted. I couldn't help but furrow my brows, trying to break free from his grip. Alexander chuckled quietly without showing any emotion and finally stood up. He tugged at his collar, his eyes full of contempt. Congratulations. Then he strode away. Damien clearly didn't have much patience. What did General Manager Alexander say? I was still thinking about Alexander's unusual tone just now when I was suddenly pushed by him. Elaine, you're not really going to be the person in charge, are you? The man was furious, with his hands on his hips. Now he was acting like a man. His dirty desires were almost spilling out of his eyes. No. Damien immediately relaxed his shoulders after hearing this, and his tone was a bit more relaxed. That's good. He was about to say something else, but I slowly grasped his wrist and placed his hand on my still not showing belly. Because you're going to be a father. In an instant, various emotions flashed across Damien's face. Shock, panic, confusion, but no joy. He didn't love me, but I didn't expect that he didn't love his own child either. I watched his expression gradually stiffen. He slowly looked up, and even the muscles at the corners of his mouth were twitching. The next moment, he pushed me away, and then realized that his behavior was too strange. He quickly hugged me, forcing his voice to sound calm. Really? That's great. Those few words kept popping out of his mouth. I rolled my eyes behind his back. Damien, this child won't do you any harm. But it can make Scarlett go crazy for you. What a pity that I didn't get to see her hysterical breakdown. When I saw her again, the woman's eyes were slightly red. She must have just been crying. There was a fierce intensity in her eyes that burst out. No matter how well she had disguised herself before, I didn't notice it. But now it's the other way around. For an enemy in the palm of your hand, you should give a slap first and then a sweet date. So, I asked her, Scarlett, I don't think I can focus on work like this. Do you want to get involved in that project? Just do it for me, okay? The look of wariness on her face just a moment ago disappeared without a trace within seconds. Sister, are you asking me to go and help Damien? I looked at her, watching the changing expressions on her face, from red to white, and couldn't help but smile to myself. She wasn't as smart as I thought. With Damien's indecisiveness and Scarlett's stupid instigation, this project would never actually be completed. And to be on the safe side, I needed that man's help. Alexander could be considered an old acquaintance of mine. When I was studying abroad in college, we lived in the same host family. However, he was a cold person and had no friends. The only interaction I had with him was probably sitting at the dining table and having the same breakfast with him every day. If I wanted him to help me, he might need to know something. The project of the Alexander family wouldn't be implemented so soon, but the next day Scarlett was waiting for Damien in the living room. Scarlett is here. Damien came downstairs a step behind me. The woman's eyes never left him. She was finally asked to stay by Damien to have breakfast. In the following months, Scarlett often invited Damien out late at night in the name of work, and I just watched their clumsy acting quietly. The size of my back support was a bit small. I should get a new one. The progress of the cooperation project was going very smoothly. Damien, as the person in charge, was in the limelight. Even my parents often praised him in front of me and mentioned casually, but isn't Scarlett getting a bit too close to Damien? I picked up some food and put it in Dad's bowl, comforting him, "It's okay. I believe in Damien's character." Dad patted my hand, "Take good care of him. After all, as a live-in son-in-law, he doesn't feel so good in his heart." I smiled and nodded, not having the heart to tell them. The good son-in-law in their mouths was an extremely evil bastard. After this situation had lasted for several months, I asked to meet with Alexander. The man deliberately chose a Japanese restaurant. Looking at the raw food on the table, I remembered that I used to love these the most. I picked up a piece of beautifully colored salmon and ate it heartily, with no regard for my image. The man folded his arms across his chest and watched me with great interest. "Miss Elaine, eat slowly. Don't choke." I slowed down my movements, wanting to talk to him about our cooperation. But the man preempted me. "If Miss Elaine is here today to ask for the position of the person in charge back, I don't necessarily mind." I was afraid that the position of the person in charge would fall on me, so I closed my eyes and pretended to have a stomachache. My stomach. Alexander's expression didn't change at all. He even laughed out loud. "Stop pretending. I know you're not pregnant." How did he know? Seeing my puzzled expression, he added, "I also know that you don't love Damien." This man really was deep in thought. He told me in detail how he had noticed the signs. Your subconscious avoidance, your expression that doesn't show your emotions easily, your complete indifference to Damien's cheating. I realized, "You've been spying on me?" Those shoes. I followed the direction of his gaze and only saw a pair of high heels at the entrance. Alexander took a bite of the sashimi, and this table of food doesn't look like something a pregnant woman of several months would do. I was just about to praise him when a familiar voice came from the next table. "Brother Damien, when are you going to take action?" It was Scarlet. I could recognize her voice even if it turned to ashes. Damien had had a few drinks and was laughing arrogantly. Scarlet exclaimed, "You've already taken action? What if you get caught?" The man was unhurried. "I can't wait any longer. If Elaine gives birth to the child, I'll have no chance." Hearing this, Scarlet seemed really angry. "Who asked you to touch her? I haven't even." Noticing Alexander's gaze, I explained in a low voice, "Damien will be unconscious when he's drunk. It's not difficult to act." He didn't say anything, with a look of belief on his face, as if he had expected my explanation. Damien boasted a few more times, completely fooling Scarlet. The two of them left soon. Probably going to get a hotel room. Alexander's hand, which was pouring tea, paused for a moment. He asked me curiously, "Do you have no feelings for Damien at all?" Some water spilled out of the cup. I was stunned for a moment. How could I still have feelings? Such a person only deserves to stay in prison and regret for the rest of his life. I didn't intend to hide it and asked him instead, "Would you show any kindness to the person who caused your family to be ruined?" The man was silent. He didn't ask about the whole story. Nor did he ask about the crimes I had falsely accused Damien of. He let out a soft sigh of relief, looked out of the window, and answered something irrelevant. "It's raining outside. I'll take you back." The car was warm. For the first time, I wasn't drenched in the rain. I told him my plan. Damien would steal the project's secrets next and then drag the Elaine family into the mess. Finally, he would come out again as the perfect son-in-law who saved the Elaine family from the fire and water. According to what you said, does he have to be in charge of this project until the end? I shook my head. "I'll tell you when to fire him." I also handed over a stack of documents. "These are the evidences I've collected so far." Alexander didn't hurry to take them. I was a bit impatient. Stopping him will only bring benefits to the Alexander family. You won't lose out. And what about you? Will you lose out? I saw his expression gradually turn serious, and for a moment, I was actually a bit flustered. Damien had never been on guard against people he considered beneath him. Because he was overly arrogant, and he had seen that I had trusted him unconditionally back then and was extremely cowardly. I found an encrypted folder on his computer. I tried to open it, but to no avail. The dates when he was dating and meeting Scarlett didn't seem right. Could it be that I should enter a familiar number? Surprisingly, the password was the date of our marriage. When I opened it, there were records of every secret tryst with Scarlett from the time they met until now, and even some unsightly photos. Suppressing the nausea in my heart, I backed up everything. Seeing that he was busy with his affairs, I couldn't just sit around either. Of course, I had to be a good wife and mother. Without informing the people in the company, I took the lunch and went straight to Damien's office. When I opened the door, Scarlett came out from behind the desk unhurriedly. She was quite surprised to see me. "Sister Elaine, why are you here?" I waved the lunchbox in my hand. "I'm here to bring food to your brother-in-law." Damien quickly came over to support me and deliberately pushed Scarlett away. He had a calm expression on his face. "Honey, you should have told me you were coming." Every time I saw him groveling like this, I felt really good. He thought he knew the final outcome, but he didn't know that I was the one who would win. Scarlett stood aside, her face turning green with anger. She said in a sarcastic tone, "Sister, you came to see your brother-in-law even though you're pregnant. You should find someone to take you back later. Don't let anything go wrong." I naturally took over her words. "Sure. Why don't you take me back?" The woman was so choked that she couldn't say a word, but she looked at Damien for help. But the man, for the sake of covering up, couldn't refuse. "All right." Scarlett was furious. Her high heels made a loud noise on the floor. Damien's face didn't change. Then he sent a few messages right in front of me. It seemed that Scarlett was quite easy to coax. When I went downstairs, the woman was already waiting at the entrance. She shook the car keys in her hand. "Sister Elaine, I'll take you back myself." Haha, as if she was someone really important. She originally wanted to open the passenger door, but I went straight to the back seat. I think she should be able to tell that I was treating her like a driver. I sent a message from there and started a conversation with Scarlett. "Scarlett, when did you buy this car?" A moment of panic flashed across the woman's face. She just laughed it off with me. "My boyfriend gave it to me some time ago." "Oh, I see." Damien was quite generous. He must have embezzled a lot from the project. Otherwise, how could he afford to buy such an expensive luxury car for Scarlett? When passing a crossroads, Scarlett still wanted to mock me a few words. But my heart was already in my throat. The next second, a deafening car horn blared through the sky. When the two cars collided, I finally saw her despair in the rearview mirror. The screams, the whispers, and the hurried footsteps were exceptionally clear in the chaotic darkness. I couldn't hold on and passed out. The moment I opened my eyes, there was a noise at the door of the ward. "Mr. Elaine. Elaine is awake." My mother's voice was trembling, full of disbelief. I tightly grasped my mother's hand, afraid that I would never feel this warmth again. I didn't even notice that the tears from the corners of my eyes had soaked her palm. I wasn't seriously injured, but Scarlett seemed to be in a bad situation. According to Andrew, she had broken a leg. When I saw Damien again, the man was unkempt, with bloodshot eyes. He looked lifeless. He urgently grasped the hand with the 4 drip in it. "Elaine, you're finally awake." I was lying on the bed, gave him a sideways glance, and pretended to be heartbroken. "Our baby is gone." The fake pregnancy was just a reason to give the Elaine family a chance to withdraw without arousing suspicion. Panic appeared on the man's face. It was an accident. Since he was so protective of Scarlett, I didn't need to be polite either. "Let's get divorced." Andrew behind me almost burst out laughing. I gave him a warning look to keep acting with me. He stepped forward. The on-site investigation determined that Ms. Scarlett ran a red light illegally and, combined with improper emergency maneuvers, caused the accident. Damien didn't say anything more. He just lowered his head, and the strength in his hand increased. I wanted to see how he would answer me. The man raised his head, his eyes unfocused but cold. "I won't get divorced. As for Scarlett, she's already disabled. Isn't that enough to make up for her mistake?" Damien's pitch-black eyes were staring at me fixedly. I didn't answer him. The ward was filled with a strong sense of conflict. Am I coming at a bad time? Looking in the direction of the voice, Alexander was leaning against the doorframe with a basket of fruit in his hand. I hid the hatred in my eyes. All of you, go out. When Damien passed by Alexander, he pretended to bow. Alexander sat down expressionlessly and questioned me. Is this the signal you gave me? Was he worried about me from the tone of his voice? I had to explain to him, I arranged this car accident in advance. Andrew is also one of us. There won't be any accidents. The man was so angry that he laughed. So, your plan is going very smoothly now? I nodded. I'm sure you should have noticed that Damien is up to something in the project. It shouldn't be difficult for you to find out about him. Alexander wasn't really listening to me carefully anymore. He just looked me up and down. Are you sure you're okay? I nodded happily, but the man frowned. Don't do this again. Scarlett realized that she was disabled. The woman was wailing in the room. Elaine. I won't let you get away with this. Damien was standing by the bed, smoking a cigarette and blowing out clouds of smoke. I was secretly listening outside the door to their blatant conspiracy. Brother Damien, you can't abandon me. I only have you. We still have things to finish. I'll help you. The woman got more and more excited as she spoke. She simply fell off the bed and staggered to kneel at Damien's feet. Seeing this scene, I was reminded of how I used to be like this myself. Damien, what kind of person are you, making two women kneel in front of you and beg for survival? The man didn't ask her to get up. Instead, his expression visibly relaxed a lot, not showing the slightest bit of the groveling he had in front of me that day. He held Scarlett's pitiful-looking face as if he were a god descending. How could that be? You're the most important person by my side. In other words, she still had some value to be exploited. On the day of discharge from the hospital, I and the lawyer directly presented the divorce agreement to him. Damien was reluctant to sign it. I saw through his thoughts. Our divorce won't affect your responsibility for any business with the Alexander family. Of course, it won't have anything to do with the Elaine family either. If his ambition was big enough, he would temporarily give up the project. After all, his ultimate goal was the Elaine family. But there was no guarantee that he wanted both. Then I would make sure he got neither. So, when he kept saying that he loved me and firmly refused to sign the divorce agreement, I quickly took out the things I had prepared long ago and spread them out in front of him. They were full of evidence of his affair with Scarlett. The man's back, which had been straight just a moment ago, trembled instantly. He tightly pursed his lips, and his eyes were full of disbelief. A few seconds later, he withdrew his wide-open eyes and immediately realized the current situation. He hugged me in a flustered manner. Elaine, listen to me explain. It was this woman who seduced me. I was deceived. Elaine, think about our child. She was the one who caused it. I shook off his hand. I'll give you 2 days to think it over. The day after the divorce drama started, a major incident occurred in the project team. Damien was promoted after successfully acquiring the land of the holdout households at a high price. General Manager Damien. General Manager Damien. General Manager Damien. Truly, people always strive for higher positions. Amid the cheers of the crowd, Damien was being fussed over like a star. He happened to run into me right at the elevator entrance. The man looked at me sideways, with an arrogant look as if the person who had knelt in front of me yesterday wasn't him. Elaine, didn't expect this, did you? Without you, without the Elaine family, I can still rise higher. The confined space in the elevator made his voice a few degrees louder. Really? It would be better if your knees were as tough as your mouth. Damien quickly became furious. Pointing at my nose, he gritted his teeth. Elaine, don't think that I dare not get divorced. After the project of the Alexander family is over, I'll make you kneel down and beg me. Haha, I've already done such a stupid thing once. There's no way I'll repeat it. I rolled my eyes at him and said with a smile, is that so? Then I wished General Manager Damien a meteoric rise. The man could tell that I was being sarcastic. His eyes, wide with anger, seemed to want to tear me apart. When the elevator doors opened, I went straight to Alexander's office. Give me an explanation. The man had a half-smile on his face. Pretending to be ignorant, he asked, I thought you'd think I was helping you. What did he mean? He continued, "Don't you want a divorce?" He thought he climbed to this position by himself. I gave him what he wanted. After being promoted, Damien became bolder. Marriage was no longer a life-saving straw for him, who seemed to have a successful career on the surface. After getting divorced, I could freely kick him down from the clouds. "Remember to give me the good news when you come out of the Civil Affairs Bureau tomorrow." Alexander was smiling brightly. Damien came with Scarlett. The woman was sitting in a wheelchair, looking quite pitiful. "Sister Elaine, it's all my fault. I love him so much." Scarlett lowered her head, and tears fell. If others didn't know the truth, they might think that I was the one who broke up their marriage. I pretended to be sorry. Wearing high heels that were over 10 centimeters tall, I crouched down to be at eye level with her. Then I looked at her empty pant leg with sympathy in my eyes. "Really? Your love for him must be more precious than just one leg, right?" Hearing this, Scarlett's face suddenly changed. Veins bulged on her neck, and fine beads of sweat appeared. Seeing that I remained calm, she turned around and pretended to be wronged again to complain. "Brother Damien, does sister-in-law not want to get divorced from you?" The man came over with his hands on his hips. "Elaine, don't drag innocent people into our affairs." I furrowed my brows, but then couldn't help but burst out laughing. People in the hall stopped to watch, making those two blush with embarrassment. The signing and formalities were completed smoothly. Damien let out a long sigh of relief when looking at the divorce certificate and strode away. Scarlett was pushed by her assistant to follow him, impatiently shouting, "Brother Damien, wait for me." Alexander acted quickly and found the companies that had received Damien's illegal business secrets. One after another, they disappeared before Damien noticed. I looked through the project's planning reports and the evidence of Damien's embezzlement of public funds. Was his promotion also part of the plan? Alexander had a calm expression. "The higher one flies, the harder one falls, right?" I nodded happily. "However, why don't you ask me why I'm treating him like this?" Alexander didn't answer. He just took the documents from my hand and, looking down, asked me, "Didn't I also refrain from asking him why he treated you like that in the first place?" In an instant, I was stunned on the spot. His calm and measured voice pierced into my ears, hinting at something as if from a different era. Did Alexander know that I was reborn? My mind was in chaos as I tried to make sense of the situation. The intriguing expression on the man's face gradually disappeared, and his gaze towards me became complicated. He really knew. He knew everything. But how could that be? I became alert subconsciously. "How did you know?" "From the very beginning." It felt like my head had been hit hard from the back. The rapid beating of my heart betrayed my lingering fear. The air seemed to freeze. He coughed uneasily a few times, trying to hide his uneasiness. I broke the silence. "Thank you." Like him, I wouldn't ask him for the reason. When I came out of the office, my steps were still a bit unsteady. I called my assistant, released the information. Late at night, Damien's affair occupied the front page headlines of the entertainment section. All the sordid affairs between him and Scarlett were condemned by the public. For a while, he suffered an unprecedented blow from public opinion. The man called me in a fury. "Elaine, what do you mean? I won't let you get away with this. I'll make you pay." This guy was good at nothing except making empty threats. After hanging up on him mercilessly, I thoroughly enjoyed the online drama. So he climbed so high by stepping on his wife's head. It's said that the mistress was a poor student sponsored by the woman. They're really two ungrateful wretches. How could the miss of the Elaine family have fallen for him? Reading the netizens' scoldings, I felt much better. Overnight, everything about Damien and Scarlett was dug out. Now they were like rats in the sewers scurrying across the street, despised by everyone. Suddenly, I remembered that night when my family was ruined. It seemed that everything could still be made right. Even faster than me was Alexander. Early the next morning, the company bulletin board announced Damien's dismissal. Due to Mr. Damien's personal conduct issues, upon the decision of the board of directors, he is hereby dismissed. People were talking about it, casting sympathetic glances at me on the bulletin board. Elaine. Damien was dressed in a suit but looked menacing. He was about to raise his hand to slap me, and exclamations rose one after another. I had no time to dodge and just stood there waiting for him to come at me. With a slap, I moved my foot quickly. The man instantly curled up on the ground, clutching his abdomen in pain. The crowd made way for him, surrounding him to watch the spectacle. Ah! Damien was cursing me while in pain. Alexander walked over casually with his hands in his pockets from the crowd. When did you learn that? I shrugged, it was a reflex. The man waved towards the door, and the security guards arrived quickly. Clear out the irrelevant people. Damien was held by two big men, his face flushed with anger and shame. Come with me for a moment. The office was empty. I reminded him, it's time to stop the project. The man, however, started to be mysterious. The project can't be stopped just like that. I don't know why I understood him like this. This project never existed from the very beginning. Alexander was a very cautious person and would never hand over such an important project to an outsider. This exciting drama was specially staged by Alexander for Damien. The whole project team was acting along with Damien. How did you know? I sat beside him, everything went too smoothly. Alexander took a deep breath. Instead of being embarrassed about being seen through, he seemed more at ease. Then how do you plan to thank me? I pretended not to know. It was I who told you that Damien couldn't be trusted, so the project was stopped. How much money would you have lost without me? The man nodded solemnly. There's one last scene. Remember to watch. The last scene Alexander mentioned was Damien finally being brought to justice. Based on the evidence we provided and the confessions of the criminal companies. He and Scarlett were arrested for the crimes of seeking commercial benefits and infringing on commercial secrets. On the day of the trial, both Alexander and I were present. Damien was still being dragged in by others. Scarlett's wheelchair rolled across the floor, making a thumping sound. The man should have come to terms with the reality and didn't spout nonsense in the courtroom anymore. All the money transactions and records were complete. The moment the judge announced that Damien was sentenced to prison, I felt a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. Remembering that I didn't get to see my father for the last time, and even my mother's passing was so hurried. I was already in tears, and my hands were shaking violently. That long-planned disintegration was no more. Now he got what he deserved. There was a warmth on the back of my hand. Alexander's large hand gently covered mine. I looked at him with teary eyes. The man remained silent. I silently thanked him with my eyes, and he just smiled with his lips pursed. The moment I walked out of the courthouse, I felt completely relieved. Alexander followed behind me. I didn't lose anything. What? He added, since I had the chance to start over, I didn't lose anything. Before he even finished speaking, my mind went blank. I almost subconsciously thought it was a joke. He also came from the past. I didn't know what to say. In the end, I only managed to say, thank you. Many years later, a piece of social news topped the list of social hot topics. Damien, the former son-in-law of the Elaine family who was arrested and imprisoned for commercial crimes, committed suicide after being bullied in prison. Scarlett, who had an emotional dispute with Damien, was sexually assaulted multiple times in the rain. The relevant personnel have been taken into custody. Although the picture was blurry, I recognized Damien's emaciated face at a glance. There were all kinds of speculations about this incident on the internet. I heard that it was Damien who forced his girlfriend to engage in sex trade to bribe others for himself. Those people in prison are all desperados. There's nothing they wouldn't dare to do. The girl wasn't willing. They were outnumbered and lost their lives. Pa! They deserved it. For a long time, they became the talk of the town after people's meals. Whenever I was around, I would be looked at with sympathetic and lucky glances. I accepted them quietly, without any turmoil in my heart. I just regarded it as a story that completely overturned my values. Later, the two families had a genuine cooperation. On the day of signing the contract, I went with my father. Alexander had been waiting in the conference room for a long time, and surprisingly, he seemed a bit reserved. "Uncle, please take the seat of honor." I looked at him with a puzzled expression, but this guy didn't even spare me a sideways glance. Watching him bustling around to take care of my father, I got angry. It was clearly him who had designated me to be the person in charge in the Alexander family. The contract signing went very smoothly. Alexander specially sent someone to see us off. Before leaving, he called out to me, "Elaine, could you stay for a moment?" The man touched his nose and mumbled a few words. "Would you like to have dinner with me?" I really didn't hear him clearly, so I leaned my ear closer to him. "What?" The man didn't answer. The next second, he directly dragged me and ran out. The wind blowing past my ears was very comfortable. The person in front of me looked back at me. "Sure. Whether it's having dinner with you or anything else." ###. Extra story: the first time Alexander saw Elaine in the morning. The girl was wearing a white dress, with no makeup on her face, looking very pure. She chewed on a piece of toast for a long time. Alexander thought to himself that she would be late. After finishing breakfast, Alexander got up to go to school. By accident, he made eye contact with the girl. Those big, innocent eyes were staring straight at him. It seemed that she was complaining that he didn't wait for her. Later, on many mornings, Alexander also gradually slowed down his speed of having breakfast, although they still didn't go to school together. However, with her walking in front, Alexander felt a sense of belonging. The first thing he did after returning to the country was to ask his father to find the Elaine family in the south, hoping to reach a cooperation with them. It was a long time later when he heard that the miss of the Elaine family already had someone she liked and the wedding was just around the corner. But he still wanted to see her again, so he volunteered to be the person in charge of the project. However, Alexander didn't expect that because of this project, he would regret it for the rest of his life. He did see Elaine as he wished, but it was at her parents' funerals. The man lowered his head, not knowing what was on his mind. Every time he thought that he was an indirect perpetrator of this man-made disaster, it felt like a hand was tightly gripping his chest, making it impossible to breathe. The echo of the girl's pain rang in his ears over and over again, and he just felt suffocated. Alexander stood quietly in the distance, his lips bitten white. He forced himself to open his eyes and see clearly what she looked like now. "If only I could do it all over again," he often fantasized like this. When he heard about Elaine again, she was already gone. Alexander couldn't hear any sound anymore. His limbs were stiff, and his heart stopped beating. He tried to breathe, but the squeezing in his chest seemed to have numbed the pain. He would never forgive himself for this in his lifetime. Perhaps even God felt unwilling. So he was given a chance to come back, and Elaine was also given a chance to come back. This time, he would do everything he could to pave the way for her. Although nightmares often haunted his nights, Alexander didn't like Elaine's way of doing things. She always got herself involved in her calculations, and it was almost the same ending as last time. So he tried his best to set a trap for Damien, just waiting for him to fall into it. He exposed his affair with Scarlett and let him steal the limelight. He let everyone know that he was deeply involved in the project. He did everything well, trying his best to prevent the scenes from his dreams from recurring in reality. When everything was over, he would complete the thing he didn't finish last time. To fall in love with her and then redeem himself.